pase, pierna derecha, directo al arco, ¡golazo! ¡Golazo!
The world of football with a soccer perspective. This is Soccer Today with Duane, Rollins and Kevin Laramee, live on the Sports Podcasting Network.
Good day, good night, and welcome to Soccer Today for September 5th, 2018. Yes, I do have a little cold. Joining us this morning on the line, the president of the North American Soccer Reporters Association and of the Philadelphia Inquirer, Jonathan Tannenwald. Jonathan, good morning. Good morning, Jonathan.
Have we lost Jonathan?
Right there we. No, you haven't. I'm here.
Good morning.
All right, good, Jonathan.
As with every time you say that about me, I remind the audience that both of you are also very involved in the organization. So
absolutely.
Fair enough. Yeah, well, I vote sometimes. Jonathan, you had an article that you think is very important. I agree, it's an important conversation to have right now. You talked to Jill Ellis about her thoughts on a possibility of another gender inequality issue involving the Women's World Cup, this time relating to technology and VAR as opposed to the technology of field turf. So just set that article up and then we'll have a conversation about it.
Well, let me correct you in one small way, which is that I didn't talk to Jill Ellis.
Okay, sorry.
Jill Ellis spoke after the U.S.-Chile friendly last Friday, and the remarks were distributed around. And I've been sitting there watching the game, and there were no fewer than 3 potential U.S. goals that were taken off the board because of certainly controversial, if not questionable, refereeing decisions. Which reminded me that we haven't heard yet about whether there's going to be VAR at the World Cup next summer. And this is a subject that has come up a couple times in recent weeks. Jill Ellis discussed it, I would say. It was raised to her, and she discussed it on a trip to Russia during the Men's World Cup, which was a bit of a promotional thing that Fox, the U.S. broadcaster, helped put on. And she sat down, she did some TV appearances, obviously. And then she also sat down with a group of print reporters from around the U.S. who were over there. And one of the questions that she was asked, was whether or not she thought that there should be VAR at the Women's World Cup, there having been at the men's. And I'm pulling up the quote here. She said, "I can't see them not having it. It would be a little insulting if we're not afforded the same opportunity. There is too much at stake to not have it. Our game, our passion, our drive, our motivation is at the same level of men." And a couple of weeks after that, there was a women's football conference in Rennes, France, which is one of next year's World Cup venues. It was during the Under-20 World Cup. And Gianni Infantino was speaking there, and he said, "FIFA is ready to bring women's football to the next level, whether by increasing access for girls around the globe or by bringing the elite professional game to new heights. The sport will continuously be integrated into our activities across the organization." He then said, "I no longer want to refer to it as women's football, but simply as football," which caused me to say on Twitter at the time, and you all might have seen it, well, if he wants to have that be the case, there are a few things that he can do. He can raise the prize money. He can put the resources on the table so that women's teams at senior World Cups aren't sharing hotels and planes with their opponents, which has happened a number of times over the years. I believe also in 2015, gentlemen, is that correct? Or did it stop after 2011?
I would have to go back and look I don't know off the top of my head, Jonathan.
And then the last one would be to have VAR at the Senior Women's World Cup, as they did for men. Well, then along comes last Friday when, as I said, there were at least 2 and arguably 3 times the United States put the ball in the net. The referee took it off the board that VAR probably, I think, would have reversed and said the goal should stand. So I tweeted during the game at a couple of journalists who I knew were there, and I said to them, "Hey, would you mind asking Jill Ellis afterward whether there's any update on VAR being at the World Cup?" And one of them did, unfortunately. And Ellis said, she said there has not been any confirmation. She said, let's all start a plan and a movement to make sure it is, because that would be the fair thing, right? If it's deserving to be in the men's game, then it absolutely is deserving to be in our game, and my hope is that FIFA will oblige. To which she later added that she noted that she understands that she alluded to the issue being that FIFA doesn't think it has enough time to train female referees on the VAR system, which I have heard from a few different places. Ellis said she'd be fine with using the men's referees for the VAR booth exclusively. FIFA uses female referees in the women's competition, as that's been their standard for a while. Ellis said she'd be fine with having men's referees in the VAR booth. As she put it, I know there's training involved with VAR, but guess what? There's people trained and they just performed in a men's World Cup, so they're available. So I wrote to FIFA after all that. I said, I thought to myself, well, there's a story here. Wrote to FIFA and I said, has there been any confirmation yet about using VAR at the Women's World Cup next summer? And they wrote back to me and said, this will be communicated in due course. That was their exact statement. They later then confirmed they will use goal line technology. They did that 3 years ago. But they won't say anything about VAR. So that led me to write a story with the following headline. U.S. women's soccer coach Jill Ellis calls out FIFA's latest gender equity problem.
Jonathan, this is my one question on that. I'm going to follow up with the referee thing in a second, but my comment on that is I'm not entirely sure they've determined that it is a benefit to the game. So until they determine that, I don't know what you can call it inequality until they actually have committed to having this full time in the men's game moving forward. If they do, then sure, it has to be on both sides. My question, though, is to do with the refereeing and the gender divide. Do you think, Jill Ellis said she'd be happy with men's VAR, in booth referees. Do you feel that the entire women's football community would share her opinion in that position, in that regard?
Well, as we saw from the finalists for the FIFA Best Player of the Year awards, I'm not sure the entirety of the women's football community knows all the details of what's going on. Were you to ask the major nations, I suspect they would say yes. Were you to ask any of the nations that are paying attention, I suspect they would say yes. Now, we can argue about the relative merits of whether or not VAR is a good thing, and I know you and I are going to disagree on that.
Yep.
Let me note, there were 0 red cards for violent play in Russia.
That is a interesting.
Don't you think that they knew they were being watched?
That's true.
Sure. Well, explain, the pedantic nature in other leagues in the world. It's just a slippery slope. That's my position on it, that it gets pedantic and it ends up, losing the spirit of the game, Jonathan. But I'm going to let Kevin jump in with the question now.
Jonathan, what I'm wondering is, there's no perfect solution, and the timeline might be short and it might not be short. But if it was up to you, if you were in charge, what are the steps that would be needed right now, not just for VAR side, but to maybe bridge that equity gap?
Well, let me start with VAR. I would venture that one World Cup is not a big enough sample size. I would also say, if you are a governing body, not a for-profit, not officially a for-profit organization, as we like to say, and you are going around there saying you are going to push gender equity and improvements in high standards in women's football, how can you yank VAR off the table after one senior tournament and not at least do it for one senior women's World Cup? And not be accused of treating the women differently from the men, having just come off 4 years ago treating the women differently from the men. I think that FIFA, this is part of why the outcry is happening. If FIFA is going to do it, they need to say it now so that they have enough time to train if they do it now, they have enough time to train the referees during international breaks and whatever else may come along, during the week for all I care. But if they wait until February or March, then they're not going to have enough time. They're going to be able to say, well, we decided to do it, but then we realized we didn't have enough time. So if they're going to do it, they've got to do it now, and that's why they're getting pushed by all the various quarters. Now, in terms of the prize money, I'm not asking for the men and the women's World Cup winners to receive equal amounts. At least I'm not yet. But the disparity is such, and the amount of pocket change in the couches at FIFA is such that they could take care of this very easily. And they should just do it. But don't we all know that's not how it's actually going to work?
Yeah, it will be a few less swimming pools for the people that are in charge, so that's not going to happen. But the other thing that I'm wondering, Jonathan, and it has to do with the refereeing side. You mentioned maybe if you put men's referee into the booth for the video review. What I'm questioning is, for the game itself, for the players themselves, does the gender of a referee matter, or should there be the best referee possible? Hopefully there's women in that, but do we need more training? Do we need an incentive like this to make sure that the playing field is level?
Oh, I think that the gender matters quite a bit, because you know that FIFA is not. Never mind FIFA per se, but I'd probably include them in this. You know that plenty of other countries in the world, given the opportunity to just promote whoever they want up the food chain, would do it. If you don't enforce having female referees at women's games, you run the risk of there not at all being gender-free merit, because the people who are making these decisions have no such ideals at all. So I think the female referees for women's games and FIFA tournaments rule is a good one. It very much, I think, it forces FIFA to develop more women's referees. This is a good thing. It forces the national associations to pay attention to it in some ways. And that's, again, why I say, if you want to have female referees in the VAR booth, you've got to make this decision now so that you have enough time to train them.
Fair enough, Jonathan. I know you have to be out at 20 after, so we'll ask you one quick question in a general way, and we'll get away from any controversy from now and just more speak to the scoreboard. About a year out, a little less than a year out from the World Cup, is there any, do you have any thoughts in terms of who we should be looking at next summer right now? Is the U.S. still the favorite?
It's funny you talk about staying away from controversy, because the U.S. just landed in one last night. Uh-huh. In a friendly that was probably meaningless, McCall Zerboni fractured her elbow and is out probably of the entirety of the NWSL playoffs and potentially the CONCACAF World Cup qualifying tournament later in the year. That's not good. Jill Ellis wanted to play these games to have a couple more games before World Cup qualifying. Nobody else is quite convinced they were necessary. And then finally they got by a major injury. Now, who are the favorites? I hate to say this, fellas, but I think the USA is at the top of the list. When you look at the amount of attacking firepower that they have, and you look at Jill Ellis having just about settled on a formation that works, I still have a couple questions, only sort of about individual puzzle pieces, but that's about it. If you have a front six of Megan Rapinoe, Alex Morgan, Tobin Heath, Lindsey Horan, Samantha Mewis, and Julie Ertz, defend that, fellas.
It's hard to pick against the U.S., although I do have a sentimental hope for the host to pull the double off. Obviously,
France is another one, certainly. I would note also, France is one. Australia is one of the really big ones at this point, I think. England is probably going to be in the mix. The Netherlands, I think, have the talent, but I can't believe they finished second in their group and blew it against Norway. They've got to get through that 14 playoff, and if they don't make it, who knows?
Be ashamed to lose them. They're a beautiful team to watch.
They're really good. They play good soccer, and they've got really good players. But then the U.S., at the end of the day, can also bring any three of Carly Lloyd, Mallory Pugh, McCall Zerboni, and Rose Lavelle off the bench.
It's going to be a long time before the world can catch up with the depth. There's no doubt, Jonathan.
Look, I realize the U.S. is flawed. They are imperfect. Somebody's going to beat them. But I do think that this team actually has the legitimate ball-playing talent to win the World Cup next year.
All right. You have to go, so we'll let you go now. Hopefully, I'm bored. I might even be in Texas later this fall. So hopefully, if you're down there, we'll see you then. We'll have a longer conversation before. If not, exciting times ahead in the women's game. Jonathan, thanks as always.
Yep. Good to talk to you.
You are listening to Soccer Today. Follow us on Twitter at SoccerTodaySPN and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network. You can find the podcast version of all the shows we do on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you get your podcast.
And we're back on Soccer Today. Duane Rollins with myself, Kevin Laramee. Speaking of Women's World Cup, Duane, did you know that Scotland qualified yesterday for the 2019 Women's World Cup for their first time in their history?
Yeah, I did, and I did because I have a lot of Scottish folks in my feed that were screaming words I have never said in my life. Scotland has qualified for the World Cup, and they were just saying the World Cup. They were being a bit tongue-in-cheek, obviously, some of them, but I think it's exciting and great for the game. England and Wales played in a game that either one of them could have went through too. Wales is in that 14 playoff that Jonathan mentioned. England scraped through the skin of their teeth. They had to win their last game. It says a lot about the state of the European game. So I think Jonathan's right that the U.S. is the favorite next year, but do not sleep on any of those European teams now. The depth is just getting better and better over there.
It's coming home. It's coming home. There's a few choices for home, though, for me. So that's the interesting aspect. All right, let's move to the news segment to finish the show today. Duane, David Beckham, you remember a few weeks ago we saw that logo with the flamingo and the circle? Well, apparently that logo was real. The names around it were different, and now it's official. It's club, not Internazionale, but Internazionale de Miami. So, Miami Inter.
Good God.
Hey, it was the only one missing. There's Real, there's a few United,
we need an Athletic. There's no Athletic yet.
Exactly.
That's got to be the next one in.
Nashville Athletic. There you go.
Well, Nashville got the stadium approved yesterday too, so there's a couple of big news points on the expansion front. Look, everyone is saying the same thing. If you read underneath their announcement, which they came out at 5:30 in the morning this morning, so that's an interesting time to be sending out a press release.
That's the question, Duane, right? 5:30 a.m. in the morning in Miami. Is it the night before or the morning of? That's what you need to ask yourself if it's in Miami and it's 5:30 a.m. Is it before they go to bed?
That name strikes to me as the night, as the end of the night, not the beginning of the day.
So, before going to bed, they tweeted it out. It was 5:30 a.m. in the morning. Bars close at 6 a.m. in Miami, if you don't know. So.
Hopefully, they wake up at 6 p.m. and go, "What have we done? Call this back." No,
call them the Flamingos. I don't know. That would be something.
The logo's great.
Yeah,
the
beautiful.
logo was done during the sober daylight. I'm not sure if the name come up, at 4 in the morning. In a bathroom stall, if you follow, but it's nonetheless. they're going to do what they're going to do. This is MLS, obviously, at their marketing level, feels they must have some kind of research that suggests that these derivative names, and that's what they are, work. There must be, because there's no other reason they keep rolling them out, because they and I guess Twitter's the bubble, and we're in the bubble. Yeah. And in the bubble, people just completely lose their mind whenever these kind of names come out. They're either boring, Nashville, are they FC or the FC? I don't remember right now.
Nashville Soccer Club.
Yes, or they're derivative. That's the two choices MLS takes nowadays. And I mean, I'm in a city with one of the boring ones. Although in Toronto FC's defense, they were the first boring one in, and then everyone's, many people have followed them since.
Don't forget Cincinnati Foosball Club.
Oh, good. Well, no, I can't. I can't forget Cincinnati or the original. We always got to tip our hat cap to the original cringeworthy name of all time, and still the champion. To be the man, you got to beat the man, and no one is ever going to beat Real Salt Lake playing in their Barca kits with Real Salt Lake as their name in a place where there's not a lot of Spanish people and certainly no Kings.
Yeah. Here's how the conversation went down for the club. Miami's a cosmopolitan city. There's people from everywhere in Miami. People from everywhere flock to Miami. Flamingos. So, what should we call? Well, we're international. We're an international city. International de Miami.
Yeah, that is probably what happened. And look,
David.
This is, for those that don't remember, Kevin, Toronto was originally, was the first thing that came out back in the big soccer days. Inter Toronto FC was registered. It was ready to go. It was there was a website ready to fly. There was the whole 9 yards. They were going to launch on Inter Toronto FC, but then people caught wind of it about a month and a half before they were ready to go live and lost their mind. And the main reason they lost their mind here wasn't to do with it being derivative. It was the fact to do that this is a city that has a lot of AC Milan fans in it, and a lot of Juve fans in it, and a lot of, right? So they said, no, we will never support a team like this. And then MLSE heard that and said no, which is why they went generic. That's ultimately,
Look at the colors they chose, though. So back in 2008, instead of having blue and black and calling yourself Inter, you went red and black and call yourself Reds, or TFC. The Reds is the nickname, but those are Milan colors and Liverpool colors, and a lot of colors.
They're also Canada's colors, which is what they were doing. But there was controversy about the colors of TFC too, and I was in one of the people back then that was very much not happy with it. I wanted a double blue. Because the Blue Jays, the Leafs, to me, at that time, the Raptors were the only outlier in terms of the sports in the city. Now TFC's obviously come in and made them red as well. So. To me, it was a mistake to not continue with what Toronto's colors are, which are blue and white. But alas, then Montreal would have came in and we would have clashed. So there you go.
Yeah, there's enough blue out there, right? I don't remember the statistic, but if you take the colors blue, white, and red across all sports, it pretty much equals at least 70% of the colors of franchises in all sport. That number might be a bit off, but those are the colors most used for sports franchises. And I have to say, looking at the logo of Miami, you have black and you have pink. And those are the colors that are I wouldn't say needed, but at least it's a different color scheme. Take away the Inter name, which we're not necessarily the biggest fan of. The rest of the branding could work. It might work.
No, absolutely. Look, I hope they go all in on the pink.
And the flamingo across the chest, right? Something fancy.
Yeah, look, it fits the city, it fits the aesthetic, it fits a need within the color scheme of the league. Not to be too, designer focused here. Pink would be great. I suspect that they'll do purple with pink trim, or black with pink trim, and purple, because purple would be their big rivalry. So they won't do that. But I suspect that they'll probably shade down on the pink, but I hope they fully embrace it. I would want bright pink as your main uniform. And because it stands out. And look, Palmero is very famous for having pink jerseys, right? And that's...
And Juventus away kit, right? Remember the famous away kit of Juventus with the Jeep sponsorship and the pink uniform? That's iconic, and that's a really one of those great kit that you've seen in the history. You have the ugly Mbappé goalkeeper jersey with all the different color schemes that are really hurtful to your eyes, but that would be an iconic jersey in MLS. And guess what? you have a pink kit with black trim with a good sponsor in front, you're going to sell a lot of those.
Yeah, I am hopeful that they drop the name, but maybe I shouldn't be too hopeful. No, pink would be great, and I think it's awesome. You think about what colors do people love whenever jerseys come out? Like greens, people like green jerseys because they're just a little bit different.
I hate green. I don't like green. I can't wear green anyways here because if I do, I'll disappear. Green screens. But no, green doesn't go well with television. That's what people need to understand. HDTV, there's two things that really don't translate well. Greens and really close patterns like pinstripe, but really, really close by. If you watch TV and you see someone wearing a blazer with very, very thin stripes close together, it feels like it's moving. It feels like there's a pattern of colors coming out of it, and it really doesn't translate well. So if I'm a designer of a soccer franchise or sports franchise, I stay away from green.
All right, bright yellow works for me too. I grew up on the bright yellow of the Belleville Bulls, so I have a fond spot for neon yellow. They would call it gold, but no, it was bright yellow.
It was mustard. I hate mustard.
I'm looking at the Bulls jersey right here. It's I don't know, mustard, orange. Who knows? It's yellow. That's fine. We're gonna maybe lose the yellow. Hopefully, look. I think the Austin thing's happening, so I'm hopeful that they're going to at least keep the yellow, but I actually don't think they will.
Yeah,
so
it's going to be that green and the red and the black of the logo.
I don't want to tell you what I think that logo looks like because I don't want to be rude on the podcast, but at any rate.
It doesn't look good. It looks like you stole something, which is literally what Precourt is doing. He's stealing a team.
Stealing everything. All right, we should talk quickly. We have 3 minutes here, Kevin, but before we wrap. The Nashville Stadium, I did mention it did get approval yesterday with, there was some touch and go there. So basically there was the pushback in the group. So the community groups have got some allowances from the builders. So there's going to be a $15.50 minimum wage requirement for anyone who works at the stadium. There is a requirement that 20% of the housing units being built will be quote unquote affordable. There's no definition of what that means. And there was a donation of sports equipment to, at-need communities. So it was a bit of they caved a little bit, but ultimately, if you read the Field of Schemes article that I put out today, it's a very small sort of cost by the owners for what they're going to get back. But at least the community group, by pushing back, did get something out of it. And now any question about Nashville starting has been answered. They'll be good to go in 2020.
If I'm Nashville, you know what I do? I make brand new soccer balls branded Nashville Soccer Club with a big logo on them, and I give it out for free to anyone who wants one. I do the same with T-shirts. You want your brand, okay, we're going to get into a branding discussion here, but you want your product, which is going to be the soccer club, the stadium, the surrounding areas, to be liked, respected, and to be made in the public consciousness of that area. And as much as it is beneficial to give back to the community, if you give even more, your logo might be on it, but at least, you'll have kids, and you have not just kids, you have people playing soccer around Nashville with your logo on the soccer, which you're representing your T-shirt. And that will start getting the word out. That will start getting people excited. And if I'm Nashville, I'm making about 10,000 soccer balls. They don't have to be made of Kevlar. They don't have to be professional standards. But make soccer ball with a logo on it and just give them out.
Well, Kevin, for those that don't know, since June, I've been doing content marketing. As during the day, squeezing this in the morning, although my schedule's loosened up a little bit, so you'll hear more guests moving forward on a pure inside baseball stuff there. But content marketing is all about giving quality, giving something to someone, but adding a little bit of yourself in there. So Microsoft CRM Dynamics 365 through CRM Dynamics. What? Sorry, what? Anyway, so that was
exactly.
That was me.
So that's exactly what I was thinking. Put your logo on it and make Nashville Soccer Club something, because right now it's an idea. Translate that idea into a movement, and you'll get a lot of money coming from it.
There you go. All right. So if you have any CRM needs, let me know. Other than that, Kevin, I'll let you wrap the show up.
As always, you can follow Duane on social media at 24th Minute and myself at Kev Laramee. We'll be back tomorrow with more football talk with a soccer perspective. And until then, As always, you can find our podcast version on sportspodcastingnetwork.com and anywhere you get your podcasts. Make sure you hit that red button if you're watching on YouTube. Subscribe and be aware of our shows whenever we go live on a daily basis. And until tomorrow, have a great soccer.
You can find the podcast version of all the shows we do on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you get your podcast.